So we have 30 seconds.
The ball just doesn't reach. It's a 80-cent, $1.25 ball.
So just call the meeting to order. Give them a minute.
I'll check with Lisa.
Okay, see if they're ready.
Or hit a really bad slice or something. Hopefully those are actually trying to how well they were playing. Yep. See if I can figure out how to sign it. 3 years since I've been here. We're glad to be like,
She's just checking out.
Okay. Ready to go? Okay. Excuse me, welcome. Welcome to the TAC meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could I whistle?
Good morning.
We'd like to get started.
Just go ahead and
Okay. Welcome to this Metro Plan Orlando TAC meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Lee Pullum, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly. Just as a reminder, since this meeting and our future meetings will be in person, it is important for all TAC members to attend our meetings in person in order for us to have a quorum. Members of the public will still be able to participate virtually, and we encourage them to do that. There are 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public attending in person who want to speak need to fill out a comment card and give it to Lisa. Those attending virtually who want to speak will use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. If attending by phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you're called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff, and we'll ask that you state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email before this meeting. I have no additional comments. I'll turn over to Mr. Caskey.
Okay, good morning. My agenda review is going to be very short this morning. I'd just like to welcome everyone back to another in-person meeting, and hopefully these will continue. We don't have any changes to the agenda this morning, so at this point we'll go ahead and take attendance. I'll ask Ms. Lisa Smith to call the roll.
Abadantuano. Blackadar.
Here.
Castro.
Here.
Brock.
Here.
Cash. Carson.
Here.
Hambley for Connellison.
Here.
DeVries.
Here.
Edie. Friel. Gold. Hardwick.
Here.
Hawthorne. Dredge.
Here.
Kessel.
Here.
King. Krug. Lim.
Here.
Moskowitz.
Here.
Kamal. Sanders for Nastasi.
Here.
O'Keefe.
Here.
Giovinazzo for Allure.
Here.
Pulliam.
Here.
Richmond. Schmidt. Sonorens.
Here.
Smith.
Present.
Stirk.
Present.
Sudemeyer. Wharton.
Here.
Radzai. El Hassar. Madam Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a physical quorum.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We have 4 presentations today. We will hold questions until the presentation ends. Please stand your nameplate on end to signal that you wish to ask a question, and we will recognize you at the end. Our first presentation will be a preview of the 2023-27 TIP by Mr. Keith Caskey.
Okay, good morning again. Just want to give you all a preview of our new 23 to 27 TIP. This will be coming back at your June meeting as an action item, and on your agenda there's a link where you can review some of the main sections of the new draft TIP. Just to start off with a brief overview, I think most of you all in here are pretty familiar with all this, but the purpose of the TIP is to identify all the transportation projects that are funded in our region over the next 5 years with federal or state funds. So any federal or state funded project has to be included in the TIP. We have the option to include locally funded projects in our document for information purposes, and we've always done that since those are important projects as well. This gives a more complete picture. And the TIP is updated on an annual basis, so we'll be back about this time next year with a preview of another new TIP. Now, this slide shows the amount of federal and state funds programmed over the 5 years of the TIP. This is broken out by the main categories of projects in our document, and all these federal and state funded projects have to be approved by our board to be included in the TIP in order for these projects to move forward and be implemented. And this amounts to over $3 billion worth of projects. And the process of developing the TIP started last year when we put together our fiscal year 27 to 35 prioritized project list. And the prioritized project list is another document that we update every year, and I think most of you are pretty familiar with that as well. You'll be hearing Alex's preview of the new prioritized project list in the next presentation, but this is the one from last year. And this included a list of projects that were either completely unfunded or had unfunded phases in the 5-year work program and TIP as of last year. And it included highway, TSMO, bike ped, and transit projects. And the projects on each of these lists were ranked by priority as candidates for funding. And, once it was adopted, then FDOT used the prioritized list to develop their 23 to 27 tentative 5-year work program. And then we used the work program to put together our new TIP. I wanted to start off by looking at the highway projects that were in last year's prioritized project list. These were divided into several different categories. We have the National Highway System projects, which are primarily the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate projects, but also includes a truck parking project in the I-4 corridor. Then there's a list of state roadway system projects. This is a mixture of different types of projects. Some of these are widening or adding lanes, but most of these are non-capacity complete streets projects, which are designed to help improve safety and traffic flow for all different modes of transportation. So they can include a combination of minor intersection improvements, putting in sidewalks and bike lanes and bus pull-offs, et cetera. Then there's a list of off-system construction projects, which are mainly widening projects on local roads that are not on the state road system. And then there's a list of complete streets projects also on local roads. And there's also on your agenda another link where you can review last year's prioritized project list that I went through and updated to highlight those projects that have had significant changes since last year. So for this presentation, I'm mainly just going to focus on those projects that have had major changes. So starting off with the National Highway System projects, again, these are mainly the I-4 Beyond the Ultimate projects, as well as the truck parking project. And the truck parking project had funding programmed for construction in fiscal year 2026 in last year's TIP, and that's unchanged in the new TIP. There weren't any significant changes to the Beyond the Ultimate projects, but there were several interim projects that are being implemented on I-4 prior to the Beyond the Ultimate project. And these were included in a group of TIP amendments that was approved late last year. And I just wanted to briefly review those. The first two are express lane projects that are funded for construction in fiscal year 2022, in the current year. So of course, these don't show up in the new 23 to 27 TIP, but these will be getting underway in the near future. And these include the two westbound express lanes on I-4 from west of State Road 528 to west of Kirkman Road, where they tie into the existing express lanes, and then it also includes an interchange improvement at Sand Lake Road. Then there's the westbound single buffer express lane from west of Central Florida Parkway to west of State Road 528. This is a project they call the Tube because it only has access at the beginning and the end of the express lane. And then there's a single buffer express lane, or a similar project on I-4 from west of State Road 536 to west of Darrell Carter Parkway. This project is funded for construction in fiscal year 2023, so of course it does show up in the new TIP. And this phase is being funded with the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act federal stimulus funds. And then there are several interchange projects that are also funded for construction in 2023 with the ARPA funds. These include two interchange improvements in Orange County at State Road 535 and 528, and then two interchange operations improvements on I-4 in Seminole County at County Road 46A and US 1792. Then we have the state road system projects. There were several projects on that list that had some changes since last year. The first two are the 6-laning projects on East State Road 50. These had changes kind of in the negative sense since the funds were moved out. The 6-laning of State Road 50 from Chuliota Road to State Road 520 in last year's TIP had construction funded in fiscal year 2025, and those funds were moved out beyond 2027. So this project does not show up in the TIP in the 23 to 27 TIP. Once those funds are reprogrammed, then it'll be back in the document. And then the 6-laning from Avalon Park Boulevard to Chuliota Road. Last year, that was funded for construction in fiscal year 2024, and those funds were moved out 3 years to 2027. And in both cases, that was because of cost increases. Then we have the Complete Streets project on Orange Avenue from Clay Avenue to Fairbanks Avenue. The safety improvement portion of the project from Clay Avenue to US 1792 is now funded for construction in fiscal year 2024. The other segment from 1792 to Fairbanks Avenue is still unfunded at this point. And then the Complete Streets project on Robinson Street from Garland Avenue to Crystal Lake Drive is funded for construction in fiscal year 24. And then there's a safety improvement project on Orange Avenue from Grant Street to Gore Street, which is now funded for construction in fiscal year 2023. Then we have a list of off-system construction projects. These are, I mentioned earlier, these are mainly widening projects on local roads. And I've listed here on the slide. I'm not going to go through all these since none of these projects had funding programmed in the new 5-year work program. But these projects are all candidates for our federal funds as well as the state transportation regional incentive program funds. Then we have the Complete Streets projects. There were several projects on that list that have new phases funded. 2 of these are in Osceola County. We have the Complete Streets project on North Central Avenue from Dakin Avenue to Donegan Avenue in Kissimmee. That has right-of-way funded now in fiscal year 27. And then the project on Buenaventura Boulevard from Simpson Road to Osceola Parkway is now funded for construction in fiscal year 25. Then there are 2 other projects in Seminole County. We have the project on North Street from Raymond Avenue to Ronald Reagan Boulevard. That is the segment from Raymond Avenue to Palm Springs Drive has construction funded in fiscal year 2025. The other segment from Palm Springs to Ronald Reagan Boulevard is still unfunded. And then there's the Complete Streets project on Winter Park Drive from Red Bug Lake Road to State Road 434 in Castleberry, and that has a new design phase funded in fiscal year 2026. Then we have the TSMO projects, and in last year's prioritized project list, the list of TSMO projects was mainly ITS and technology projects on local roadways, and I didn't see any of those projects that received funding in the new 5-year work program. But this year I kind of reorganized the TIP, little bit to what had been the TISMO section of the TIP. I changed the name to Traffic Operations and Safety, and then I kept the TISMO projects in there and moved the projects that were specifically identified as safety projects from the highway section to Traffic Ops and Safety, just to give the safety projects a little bit more emphasis. And there were three safety projects that are being funded for construction in fiscal year 2023 with ARPA funds. These are all in Orange County, and these were included in the TIP amendment that was approved late last year. These projects are on State Road 436 from north of Old Cheney Highway to south of University Boulevard. And then there's a project on Conway Road from Devonshire Lane to Lake Underhill Road. And then the project on Washington Street from US 441 to I-4. And then a project that was moved from the highway section over to Traffic Ops and Safety is the safety improvements on US 192 from Florida Avenue to Michigan Avenue in St. Cloud. That's funded for construction in fiscal year 2023. And then there's a new safety project in Seminole County on State Road 434 from Range Line Road to US 1792 in Longwood, and that's funded for construction in fiscal year 2025. Then we have the regional trail and school mobility projects, and on this slide I've listed the projects on that list that have phases funded in the TIP. These include the Hickory Tree Elementary School Sidewalks Project in Osceola County, which is funded for design in 2025. And then there are two regional trail projects in Orange County that are both funded for construction. We have Little Econ Trail Phase 3 and the Shingle Creek Kirkman Trail. Then finally, we have the transit projects, and these are primarily projects that are implemented by links. Some of these are ongoing, like the capital expenses and purchasing new vehicles and putting in passenger amenities and so on. And then we have the Sunrail Phase 3 from Sunrail Main Line to Orlando International Airport. Lynx has both their southern and northern operations bases on the list. Then there's the parking expansion at the Meadowwoods, Tupperware, and Poinciana Sunrail stations. And then Lynx has their service enhancements, phases 1 through 3, which are improvements and expansion of their route system throughout the region. And then Lynx also has the transit facility implementation, phases 1 and 2, which are improvements to Lynx Central Station and other transit centers in the region. So that's an overview of last year's prioritized project list and how some of the projects were funded in the TIP. I did want to mention that, of course, this area has a lot of toll road facilities, and I didn't include the toll road projects in the presentation, just in the interest of time, and since those are not part of the prioritized project list. But obviously, those are very important projects as well, and so we include the Turnpike and CFX projects in the TIP. And we will be having our virtual TIP public meeting. That will be on Monday, June 20th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. That'll be on Zoom, and there will be more information on that coming up on our website. So again, this will be coming back as an action item at your June meeting. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, hi Keith. Erin Sturck, Transportation Manager with St. Cloud. I've got a couple of questions for you. I sent a couple of FM numbers over about projects that I thought were new projects but not identified as such. I'm wondering if you had a chance to look at those.
Yeah, I think that was just an oversight. I went back and checked, and yeah, those are new projects, so
Okay.
I made that.
I think the only one I'm curious about is, I think, the Castleberry project. So I don't know if you remember specifically or if Castleberry folks are here that can talk about it, but.
Which
Sure,
project
Kelly.
was it?
It was
You're
just,
talking about the Winter Park Drive
yeah, there you are. Thank you.
Complete Streets?
I don't think I've heard about that. So I was curious if you could tell us about the new project.
The Complete Streets project, it's not new. It's actually been for a couple of years now, at least on the priority list, and the study is currently underway. You will be seeing later this fall a report on the preferred alternative for that project. Yeah.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay,
But
that's the only one of those that I wasn't familiar with. I do have a suggestion or a request for the Turnpike project on between 192 and Parton Settlement Road. Last year, they confirmed that the interchange improvement at 192 was a part of that project, but the TIP still doesn't call out that interchange improvement. So I just want to make a recommendation that we modify the work description to include.
Okay, yeah, I'll check with them and confirm that. I know in the work program, it just said, add lanes and reconstruct, but I'll check and see if that includes the interchange, and if it, assuming it does, I'll make that change on
Okay.
there.
Fantastic. And then I have one more thing regarding the I-4 beyond the ultimate segments. This time last year, when the TIP came forward, this committee because it's, a real issue down there. So I don't see that any alternative solutions have come forward on the draft of this TIP, and I have some real concerns about that. So I sent over some questions to DOT about what the status was. I really had expected to kind of get an update. It's been a whole year, So, but because that corridor has multiple agencies, roadways kind of tying into it, and they all jam up together, I wanted to suggest that we get kind of like a regional working group going on that could possibly include the Florida Turnpike representatives, CFX, Osceola County, Orange County, myself from none of those agencies, but I really want to kind of get our heads around what's going on down there and work on funding some solutions. On the prioritized project list, I see that the improvements to that corridor are really far down the prioritized project list as well. So it's just really concerning that there's still nothing happening there. And 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when we all funded as a region, we funded the I-4 Ultimate project. And it's, we spent $2.3 billion on it in Orange and Osceola counties, Orange and Seminole counties. I guess my concern is that the equity share really was on paper, it was programmed, it's been taken away. So my recommendation is, since we don't have anything identified in the last year as a solution, that we all need to get to the table and come up with some solutions. I'm sure they have them, but I want to know what they are, and I want to have this committee and the board have an opportunity to fund those solutions. So, because they're not called out even on the PPL, which is, 6 years out, right? We need to start identifying what's going to be done to resolve those issues. So I don't know if Metro Plan can play a role in that coordination, since it's even got CFX involved with 417, but.
Yeah, we can check with DOT, and I think they've, I saw the string of emails kind of going back and forth, so I know they're trying to working on answers to your questions. But
Okay.
yeah, we can coordinate with DOT and
Awesome.
Turnpike and so on and see if we can.
And I know, what I would just hope and request we can do is meet before this comes back to us for a vote. Because if there are some projects we need to more specifically call out, then I hope we have the chance to do that this year and we don't waste another year. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. Just scanning the room to see who heard this 15 minutes ago. So I will do my best accordingly. So no, all jokes aside, as Keith mentioned, and he did part of the presentation, kind of giving the background about the prioritized project list. It is an annual process. It's an element of the TIP. It's that kind of in-between piece, our bridge between our long-range plan, our metropolitan transportation plan, and the TIP. Based on federal requirements, we can only focus on the first 10 years. Long-range plans look 25, 30 plus years into the future based on the requirements. And I think it's by best practice, kind of focus on, the next decade worth of projects. And that's a pretty substantial to-do list in and of itself. But these are federally and state funded priority lists. Your local list back home, your CIPs are well within the jurisdiction of those. So that's why we don't have them included here. So a little bit about approach. I mentioned planning consistency as it relates to the MTP. We adopted MTP, we identify needs, we identify cost feasibility based on available forecasts. We take the first 10 years of that and we start to reshape those projects. So if you're identified in the first 10, it does open up flexibility for reevaluation, reprioritization, but that's a hard line drawn as it relates to kind of that 10-year mark. But of course, MTP amendments are part of our process now, and we can certainly entertain those as appropriate. We are using a performance-based process, and it's pretty well documented, in my opinion, in here. Scoring criteria method. If you wanted to attempt to replicate this and you had some GIS experience and availability to data, you could certainly do this, a very transparent, comprehensive, robust, and replicable process. So we're doing that. It's been seen as a best practice by the Transportation Research Board as well as most MPOs in the state. And with the end goal, advanced projects. A couple considerations. Funding eligibility is key to what we do. Funding sources come with strings attached, certain projects, certain networks, certain areas. We're keeping that in mind as we're developing our priority lists. I mentioned MTP cost feasibility. That's first and foremost in the work that we do. But those last two items, funding availability, project phasing, and readiness is kind of where the rubber meets the road, no pun intended, with the priority list. When you, for example, I think we talked TISMO earlier, that program based on our board's SU policy receives about $9 million a year. So how do we program that? So we're looking at getting some construction projects in, some design projects in, trying to kind of meter the program to some degree, prime the pump. In some cases, we don't see projects come in, so we start seeing a lot of design, and you'll see that later on. But we're trying to kind of recalibrate that. This is a figure from our 2045 MTP, just a couple modifications for purposes of today's presentation. I'm going to talk about each of these lists in detail today, and they are well summarized in the new draft PPL document in and of itself. It's important to note here, you will see a couple asterisks. We are developing a couple of these programs, still works in progress, and we're going to be coming back and using this body or a subset of this body to kind of shape and define those programs over the next few months to prep for next year. Or by other previous resolution. And again, this is how we are implementing projects, kind of our portfolio of projects. It's a way to look at this. So IHS, our Strategic Intermodal System projects, I know we had some discussion on that already as it relates to the TIP, but these are the cost feasible projects that were adopted in FDOT's Strategic Intermodal System cost feasible plan. So some of the timing, phasing, and implementation of that is based on central offices programming of these statewide discretionary funds. You'll see we have truck parking in that list. Keith did mention the PD&E studies that are happening, but our region has a lot greater need than what's already in the work program, so that's still going to be a key freight priority for our region and one of our top national highway freight program priorities as well, so that's important to note. But our priority list, our 2045 plan looks at the ultimate configuration of I-4, that footprint, county line to county line throughout our study area. Obviously, devil's in the details as it relates to implementation, phasing, timing, funding availability. So we'll certainly have that discussion in the coming weeks with the partners down in that area to see how we can get a better idea of the timing schedule of the beyond the ultimate sections. You'll also see State Road 60 on there. That's in the SIS cost feasible plan. Real safety need in South Osceola County leading into Polk County. So that is SIS cost feasible. So that's why it's not on the state highway system, but on the SIS priority list. State highway system, these are our key priorities. These are what we're working with DOT to advance in addition to the segments that Keith mentioned in his presentation. So this is kind of what's next in addition to the phases that have already begun in the work program. So we're always finishing what we start first and then bringing in new projects. So you'll see at the bottom of all these pages, but in the draft PPL, you will see a reformatted document from previous years. Summarizes process, background, gives you kind of a little context of what you're looking at. And then there's a cut sheet for every program or project list. And then you'll kind of go back to the traditional appendix where you'll see the long list of projects and phases and costs. So keep that in mind as you're reviewing the document. Our off-system construction assistance program, as Keith mentioned, these are $175 million was identified in the 2045 plan to implement projects off the state highway system. These are our other arterial funds that would traditionally be spent on the state highway system. So we've pulled those funds, reserved those funds. These are priorities. These are not ranked at this point because there's a key requirement for these projects being funded with this category, and that is local agencies advancing the preliminary phases consistent with the federal process. So these are federal state funds. So if you're doing a PD&E, if you're doing design, if you're doing, if you have to go through a right-of-way acquisition process, it needs to be consistent with those standards. So we always want to keep that in mind. If you're entertaining federal or state funds, you have to play by the rules. And obviously, that's just kind of, the situation with this particular program. This complete streets context sensitive list and the next few lists are going to be the lists funded with our urban area funds. These are funds with direct discretion from the Metro Plan Orlando board. These are where we're actually recommending or telling in a way DOT which programs to fund with the funds by our board. You'll see these are, again, similar to the other projects, the next set of projects that will be entering into the work program. As I noted on the kind of large figure slide, there's a couple project lists that still need a little work, that still need more time, that we're acknowledging we want to do it right the first time. And one of those is the safety emphasis projects. We've identified funds in the MTP, it's certainly a need. We have a vulnerable users working group, and we're going to work with them and this body. We'll kind of use that working group as a kind of litmus kind of sounding board, and then we'll kind of bring it back up to TAC. To kind of define those programs. We'll likely end up doing a call for projects and some type of evaluation, but we haven't determined that method, that process, that approach. That will be at the prerogative of that working group and of this advisory body, how we want to advance those projects. But we're talking $1 million a year total funds, so we have to talk programming availability to kind of prime the pump, get that program going. So this will probably be a lot of kind of push button type spot improvements, but we'll see what comes out of the working group's discussions about what they want that program to be. What we know is we have the funds available for the next priority list and for the next tip, so we need to be aggressive over the next 4 to 6 months to dial in this program, get those priorities identified, so the next time that we're talking priority list and program, we're adopting those projects in as an element versus just a generic program. TSMO corridor and intersection projects, you'll see we have some preliminary engineering design as well as construction. But I mentioned before, a lot of PE is going to be entering. Keith mentioned not a lot of those TSMO projects entered in, so you're going to start seeing more design, those preliminary phases going into the work program in the future years. Two other TSMO related categories that we talked about a little earlier with that advisory body, but two other programs that were identified in the MTP that we've set aside funds that need some more discussion. That group is already, a sub-body of the TSMO group has already kind of started looking at what projects may be eligible, funding, some of the kind of, we'll call it program specs. So we already have a head start on that, but we're going to bring that group back together in the next couple months, start talking evaluation method, and start to get a call for projects later this year, again, so we can be prepped for the next PPL. $1 million though, important, so I have 1.25 here through the life. It's $1 million for the area-wide project, so that's going to be buying your CCTV cameras, your signal cabinets, things of that nature. We might have points kind of throughout your city or an area, and $250,000 a year, $250,000 for the ACES demonstration as well. We'll have to kind of frame that out. What's eligible? What can we start spending on in the near term? I will say, and it's just kind of important to know for kind of general accounting, any of these funds, if I kind of go back to this list here, any of these funds, these kind of sub-programs that we don't spend on will roll back in and will be funded under those programs. So it doesn't kind of get lost in the mix. We're still kind of targeted. It just will lose a little focus on the specific investment type. So those are those two categories. Your TSMO will be receiving an email from Eric about kind of shopping a date for kind of getting that group together. Chad had a great idea earlier about, kind of maybe a broader group, TAC, TSMO, maybe some other folks to kind of have a more kind of robust, comprehensive discussion. We like that idea. We'll take that back. And again, we'll be following up on those new programs because we want to spend the next, next 120 days kind of defining them. Pedestrian infrastructure projects. These are kind of the multimodal regional trail projects. As we, in our MTP, you'll see Shingle Creek Phase 4. fully funded there, preliminary engineering and construction, and then design for both the East-West Trail Connector and the E. Williamson Path there in the Longwood area. Safe Routes to School, that's an FDOT program, but we have a supplemental program adopted into our MTP to help those projects advance that aren't picked up by FDOT's Safe Routes program. Keith mentioned Hickory Tree is going to be entering into design, so the other priorities we'll be working on through the coming weeks. I mentioned this to TISMA. We will be reaching out to some of these applicants. Some of the applications need dusted off and updated in some cases, but we'll be reaching out individually to make sure that we have good information on all those so we can, again, get them funded. Critical gaps is something else. We had a presentation to the Vulnerable Users Working Group about a bundling methodology that followed a federal highway method, let's say 2 months ago, I believe maybe 3 months ago now. We took that method, took the feedback received, and did a bundling analysis. As I mentioned earlier this morning, we're kind of doing a staff review of that, and likely in the next week or so, we'll be sending a kind of email blast out to TAC for a bundle review. And it's really at this point in time going to make sure, are the bundles logical? Are the segments where there's truly a gap? Again, we're doing regional analysis, kind of drilling down in. So we want to make sure we have it right. So we'll have you review those. If you're building something, if it's in your capital improvement program, we need to resolve that as well. Make sure we're not duplicating any efforts. We just want to supplement one another and complement each other's work. So that is the intent of GAPS. We've identified the money. We want to spend the next 4 to 6 months getting it right, picking those bundles and programming them through a packaged process in the next tip. Keith mentioned regional transit projects. I'll just kind of briefly cover them. Again, getting Sunrail Phase through the airport obviously links his satellite operation centers in the northern and southern areas of our region, parking lot expansions, Sunrail parking lot expansions, and of course, links his expansion of their current system, and of course, all of their transit asset management and safety needs. So those are our priorities. That's what you'll see. Obviously, the focus here is a bridge between our long-range plan and our TIP, and you'll start to see that. Last slide, this is a draft similar to the TIP, so if you have comments, if you have feedback, especially as it relates to implementing agency, things of that nature, I've already gotten some feedback from a couple folks. I have notes, and I'll be sure to update our database. But if you see something in there that's, might say Seminole County, but it's a municipal project, vice versa, we want to make sure we get that right so we make the right phone calls and we're not kind of bothering the wrong folks. So, with that, we are asking for your feedback by June 3rd, a couple weeks. We are making ourselves available, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have questions, comments, feedback, you want to set up a call with Nick, Keith, and I, we are amenable to that. We want to make sure we answer your questions. We want to make sure you're comfortable with the process and what we're going about here. End game, end goal, July 27th, our board will be taking action on this prioritized project list. So between now and then, we have some time to iterate, time to reconsider some things, but this is where things land based on priorities of the past, the process that we used last year, which is this is largely the same, just really a reformatted document. So with that, I see we have some questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Hey, so for the safety prioritization process and the TISMA one, which are still in development, since those funding pools are relatively small compared to what we put into roadways, is there an opportunity to leverage those together so that projects could be submitted and considered for both and potentially receive more funding? Or are those separate pots of money and need to be treated very differently?
It's open, and I would say it's honestly kind of the prerogative of this group and any subgroup. The funds are kind of reserved in the MTP, kind of, I don't want to call it set aside. They're identified for specific project types that kind of meet. So if we wanted to kind of blend the safety with sidewalk, it would then be focusing on the most critical safety sidewalk issues. Certainly an option. The sidewalk bundles came from our ped bike needs assessment. We just saw hundreds, I think thousands of miles of local, especially off-system sidewalk gaps. So this was our way of trying to, start chipping away at that, 10, 20 miles a year at a time. But there's flexibility in these programs, and I hear you kind of, bringing those funds together, you can, might accomplish a lot, or you can chip away regionally at, like I said, 5 miles of gaps here and there throughout the region, but we're open. And the benefit of where we are now is we'll at least have the bundles identified. We can vet them, and then we can, if that's the path we take, we could develop a prioritization evaluation method that is safety. I will say our prioritization method is already safety focused, safety emphasized, but we could do something, more specific to vulnerable user safety. So, and that's up in the air. And again, sorry to repeat myself, we can certainly entertain that discussion at a subgroup or another presentation at another TAC meeting. However, this body wants to govern those priority lists.
I made this request in TSMO earlier. I'll just repeat myself for those that have joined in TAC. The county's interested in having a meeting to go over the prioritization process and the algorithm that has been created to score and rank the priority projects. We've noticed some patterning going on. We want to better understand that, take you up on your offer of creating some time to go through that. Also be interested in getting the algorithm formatted to where we can test our candidate projects to see how they score and potentially would rank. So we're looking for that time. The other counties, cities, welcome to join us as well.
Certainly, just a quick response. I know I responded earlier, but just for the benefit of this group, we'll certainly have that discussion. I do want to go on the record of saying, our method is clear, is comprehensive, is objective driven, is consistent with our board's direction that we received as staff with the MTP and more recently at their March meeting where they gave us kind of the final charge for prioritization approach. But what the method does not address, and I think it's kind of the root issue, is geographic funding distribution. So it's a comprehensive evaluation metric model that looks at what we said was important, the weighting, the criteria that we said was important, but what it does not do, and full transparency, it does not consider geographic funding equity. That is typically the prerogative, of our board, and that's kind of been the case for the past couple of years. So we have raised that issue. I want you to know that has been raised, to our board leadership, through this process and, through our TAC chair, feedback. But I just want to be open and just clear that the method here is testable, very replicable. We're showing model script paths where you could truly replicate this. But we've also uploaded all of the outputs, all of the findings to our data viewer. So you can click every segment, you can see the attribute input, you can see the model forecasted results. And then if you cared enough, you could kind of go back to the evaluation method and see why it scored high, medium, or low based on the banding that we used, the thresholds bins that we set, which was based on a valid statistical approach for setting thresholds. So like I said, we're using best practice. I know it's not perfect, and it doesn't address what you're asking for, but I just want to, in a way, defend an objective process that aligns with what our board is asking us to do as staff.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, I guess, Mr. Sanders. You mentioned, or he mentioned, the opportunity to have prioritized projects go through kind of like the algorithm as you bring them forward. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. One, you want to be ranked when you submit your project, but you want to be sure that, I think the value in it is that you can have an opportunity to use the tool to evaluate what you're proposing to ensure you're capturing everything you should within one project on a corridor, which is, Laura mentions that all the time. Have we done enough for bike ped, and those kind of things. So I guess my question is, since you all run the algorithm and some of us don't have huge staffs with tons of really smart engineers who can run it themselves, is there an opportunity kind of moving forward to develop kind of like a pre-screening with MetroPlan about how, like when we submit projects or when we come up with ideas for things, to kind of run that through the process is like a pre-app at your local level, you know? But just to kind of talk that out and have that conversation, you know, with you all who are experts in how it will rank.
Right. As I mentioned before, you can already do that. You know, in the data viewer, we have a normalized and a weighted prioritization score, and you can look at every objective, every criteria, every goal area, and see how the projects score. That's on the data viewer. That went out, I think, 2 weeks ago, prior to the TAC agenda going out to TAC and TISMO, with a link to our data viewer. We can certainly talk more about that. That is a pre-screening process. We're always updating that. We can obviously revisit criteria. We're going through the modal master planning process for a reason, knowing that, you know, one wholesale set of criteria may not be perfect, you know, for evaluating every project. You know, Aaron, you had some comments in your email. How come we're not, you know, evaluating limited access facilities versus trails? It's like apples and bananas, you know. It's like, how do you, you know, really, you know, measure those and feel good about the method that you're using? So that's where our modal master plan is, not to punt or kick this down the road, but that's where we're really going to take a really focused effort of saying we need to be objective, we need to be data informed, we need to use these performance-based approaches, but we need to cater that analysis specific to the user. And we try to be kind of mode agnostic, kind of neutral, and that's really challenging when you're dealing with kind of the portfolio of projects that we have. So we're recognizing that what we have is not perfect, but I will say is we are, as staff, being as transparent in these data performance-based processes as we can. In our data viewer, like I said, you can click the segment, you can see the score, see how it shakes out. What's not, I guess, the only difference, what you'll see is our prioritization year to year changes, obviously, because we're using the latest and greatest of available data. But we did basically the same modeling, or I hate to use that term, same network evaluation for the MTP, same criteria, same method. The only difference is it included the scenarios. So that's where we had some iterative scenarios for part of the scenario planning, where some projects based on growth rates and kind of intensities, you know, rose, where others kind of, you know, kind of remained kind of in the middle. So I'll say that, but we're open to it. We acknowledge it. Imperfect doesn't address Brian's, you know, funding equity question or funding distribution question. I want to make sure we separate those terms. But I'll leave it at that. Sorry, Madam Chair, for the elongated spiel.
Thank you. I do have one follow-up. It's on a separate topic, though. And Alex, thank you so much for re-explaining that. I feel like I already should know those tools exist and should have already used them. So I'll go back and do some work at the local level. Because I worry that our old projects, you know, we just didn't look through the same lens, you know, not as, and we may not have accomplished everything with the needs list that we maybe could. For this interstate highway system and strategic intermodal system, I mentioned this earlier when I brought up the Osceola County segments and the South Orange County segments of the I-4 corridor. This is really ranked according to FDOT's prerogative, right? So I'm seeing that even though those segments were previously funded, they're very low on the list. And I'm guessing that's because you really can't widen something to 8 lanes at the south end that you haven't kind of worked your way to, right? So it seems to appear to me that this list is kind of sequential in order and you got to get there, right? But I wanted to just talk about this priority list when we meet with those entities so that we can kind of just acknowledge how this came to be and if anything different needs to be identified on the PPL for those projects that are replacing the Beyond the Ultimate.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that, and I mentioned this in the email, but just so for everyone's aware, you know, DOT just is in the process of updating their SIS investment element, which kind of drives a lot of interstate highway, that kind of, I call it central office directed spending. So yes, they are using their own independent method. You know, it is objective and they use kind of economic models, financial analysis to kind of look at benefits and cost and return on investment. So there's a lot of considerations, but that process isn't being updated. I haven't gotten a date when we'll get a new, you know, SIS cost feasible plan other than they've wrapped up the policy elements, which kind of drive a lot of their decision making. And now they're looking at revenues, and obviously statewide revenues, you know, things are in flux, obviously, you know, those, a lot of, especially SIS is doc stamp fund it, so it creates complications. But that investment element's being updated with DOT's, my understanding, revenue estimating conference, which looks at estimating revenues for the entire state of Florida. So they're calibrating what they're going to bring in so they know what they can realistically fund versus just, phasing for phasing's sake.
I'm wondering if before we actually vote on it, I mean, how many people have actually gone and looked at this model that they're talking about? You have? Okay. And you have?
Yeah, but I think just looking at it, I still need what Aaron and Brian are saying, some sort of walkthrough training on the tool to further understand this is what this layer, how we developed this layer, this is how you can use it when looking at your projects. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would just ask in advance that everyone please read the document. We spent a lot of time trying to be clear, and I think a lot of the answers are in there about methods and processes. I will say Orange County has been speaking graces to our methodology and how they're using it for some of their initiatives. So I just want to, put that out there that, it is being replicated elsewhere given its kind of comprehensiveness. But it lists data sources and methods and everything. So we are being clear. It is a GIS model builder. So it's not a black box. I don't want, I've developed models, it's not a crystal ball, it's not a black box, but it is a transparent method for doing the type of network analysis that we're doing for a 3,000-mile network. So I'll leave it at that. So.
Okay. Thank you. Our next presentation is on the the 2023 Ozone Contingency Plan by Dr. I'm not sure how to say your name. Dr. Yu. Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that. Thanks. So again, my name is Hafi Yu. I'm Assistant Professor of Environmental Engineering at UCF. So I'm here to present some work on ozone contingency plan for the OSO region, for the Central Florida region. So, oops, sorry, it's, okay, perfect. So first is ozone is, if you're not familiar, ozone is, we heard of ozone layer up there in the stratosphere, but that's good ozone. When ozone layer up there, it absorbs harmful UV, so when you go to the beach, you don't get, severely sunburned. But when ozone is presented in ground level, when people are exposed to ozone, it's a problem because ozone triggers harmful impact, such as asthma, emphysema, whatever, a bunch of different health impacts. So when ozone is at ground level, it's bad ozone. Ozone is regulated under the Clean Air Act, one of the major air pollution regulation in the United States. The concentration standard is in the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, we call it NAAQS. So EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has an extensive network measuring ozone concentrations in the entire United States. So by regulation, so the concentration of ozone measured cannot exceed the NAAQS standard. If it exceeds NAAQS standard, then we have a problem. It means very expensive regulatory actions. One example would be, in other states, you have inspection maintenance program. You have to bring a car to get inspected. We don't do it here because we don't need to do. That state, they have to do it. They have no choice. I think we all know how expensive that could be. So this is the measured ozone level. Rather, it's design values in the three county regions, Osceola, Orange, and Seminole County regions. And the design value it's a mouthful. So just back a little, it's an annual first highest daily maximum 8-hour concentration every year over 3 years. It's a mouthful, but just the biggest message is the fourth highest value within a year, fourth highest. So if we look at the values, ozone standard measured in this region, we see that if you see the two lines here, the black line is the standard before 2015, the red line is the standard after 2015. It's an updated standard. We see the concentration level of ozone in this region is very close to violation. It's only a few ppb, close to violation standard. So as we all know, if it's violated, we have a problem. It's going to be quite expensive. So the whole idea is that we need to be prepared, because if the violation happens, we need to know what we're going to do, where we're going to spend the money. So that's why we come in. And we want to be able to develop a plan to prepare this region for the potential ozone violation. So the tricky thing with ozone is not the vast majority of ozone. Like I would say 99% of ozone, ground level, is not emitted. It's not because a car emitting ozone is formed in the air. This is what when you have nitrogen oxides and also VOC, or volatile organic compounds. When you have these two chemicals and you have sunlight, you have ozone. You have formation. It's a chemical process. That makes it tricky. So NOx and VOC can come from many different sources. NOx, the vast majority of NOx in this region is from cars, vehicles, transportation sources. But VOC is more tricky. We have a lot of VOC come from like vehicle engines, from power plants, and about half the VOC here come from trees, and we cannot cut down trees. So we need to know what to do. So that's the goal of this project. This project goal is basically, we want to know where is the most important source of NOx and VOC. We want to identify them, and we want to understand how they're distributed, spatially and temporally how they're distributed. And then we want to know what is the policy options available to reduce their emissions so we can cut down ozone concentration should the violation occur in the future. So we have 3 different tasks here. So first is we're going to estimate emissions for vehicle sources from transportation sectors, and then we're going to estimate emission for all other sources. Based on EPA, there are over 10,000 different sources in this region, categories, 10,000 source categories in this region. And finally, we want to know what is the different policy. We want to understand what policy options are available for us and what their impact on the ozone content, on the emissions of NOx and VOCs. So far, we have done task 1. We already completed the vehicle emission. We run this regulatory model called Motor Vehicle Emission Simulator. A MOVES model is completed. On the second one, it's a little bit more complicated because we need to run the weather model, because a lot of emissions actually depends on weather, such as vegetation emissions. Vegetation emission, like say when you walk in the forest, you smell this good, especially after rain, right? Smell the freshness, very good smell. That's VOC. We need to know how much are there. That highly depends on weather. So we already run the weather model, weather forecasting model, weather research and forecasting model, WRF, and we generate meteorological data. And next we're going to run this thing called SMOKE. It's a mouthful, but it's a regulatory emission model. We're going to run it to estimate all other emissions. So task 3 is planned but hasn't started. So just a quick update what we did. In task 1, we run this thing called MOVES model estimate emissions. Now we are not only include the Osceola, Orange, and Seminole County, we also include the Lake County because Lake County is just too close to us. It's in we call it the airshed. It's the same region. You cannot just ignore it. It's too close. It's a major source. And we also not only will estimate total emissions, we perform our estimation on individual road segment level. We have emission estimates for 36,000 roadway segments in the region. And we basically estimate the emission from 17 different emission processes from vehicles. You have one car, but in that car, you may have many different potential sources, such as the biggest one is tailpipe, and you also have hot tunneling. So basically, if you have heavy-duty truck, just stay in the truck rest area. It keeps running overnight. That's hot tunneling. Few evaporative system, and a bunch of different things. So this is what is the total number we come up with. The ton is metric tons. So we estimate the emissions for 2011, 2017. The reason we choose this year is because we have to compare our data to the authoritative source from US EPA, and their latest data is 2017. It takes a long time for US EPA to update the inventory. So this is for nitrogen oxide. So basically the whole idea is between 2011 and 2017, in the 4 counties in this region, we see a big jump, a big declining of emissions. It's significantly declining. And we see, of course, Orange County dominates. It's the biggest source. And if we break down the sources, we see the tailpipe running exhaust emissions is the biggest one, followed by start emissions. Start is when you crank the vehicle starts and the engine is still cold, and it emits more pollution at that time. And if you look at the VUC, it's slightly different. VUC, we see the same thing. Between 2011 and 2017, we see decline in emissions, but the source of the VUC is more diverse. So we still see running exhaust emissions from VUC, but we start to see some other things. Start emissions, more important. We also see the evaporative system. So evap system is in your car, you have a tank, gasoline tank. And inside you have a whole system controlling the vapors because gasoline vapor are explosive. And you don't want to just, emit them. So you have a whole system collecting and burning those vapors, and that's the evap system. That evap system, by design, it cannot be completely sealed. That's going to be a big problem. So you will always have some release. And you also have some refilling losses. For example, you're refilling a car, and when you pump gas in your tank, the gasoline vapor in the tank going to be pushed out. Those are emissions. So this is accounted for there. And you also have a bunch of others. That's relatively small portion. So the whole message is between 2011 and 2017, we see the emissions of both VUC and NOx decline significantly. If we compare our results with the National Emission Inventory, which is the authoritative source compiled by US EPA, our estimates is roughly similar, for both 2011 and 2017, with one exception, Osceola in 2017. It's quite interesting because in the EPA, in NEI, you see that the NOx emissions jumped drastically. But in our study, we see that it actually declined. And we found this is mostly because it appears there is error in EPA's database. So when you estimate emissions, you need to put how many vehicle mileage traveled in there. And the vehicle mileage traveled, or VMT, is actually twice as expected in EPA's database. So it appears there is an error over there. So same thing means VUC. We see that NEI's estimates for VUC in Osceola in 2017 is much higher than anticipated. So as mentioned, we also estimated the emissions on all the major roadway links for both 2011 and 2017. Now, this is for both NOx and VUC in Seminole County for 2011 2017, only major roads. So clearly we can see that the darker the color is, so basically the more emissions per mile. Basically we see the biggest emission source is those most major traveled roads. You can clearly see I-4 as 417 over there. You can clearly see that. And another thing we see that, compared 2011 to 2017, we see the emissions actually decline. This is anticipated. Because the total emission declined, actually we do see that on roadway links is also declined. This is for Orange County. We see the same thing here. You can clearly see I-4 on all the major roads. So this is for Osceola. You say the same thing, and this is for Lake County. Again, it's the same thing. So I want to quickly show you one thing is I have animation here. This basically shows the hourly emissions. We performed the emission estimation for 36,000 links on every hour of the year for 2 years. So this is the hourly emission summed across all the hours. Hour 1 is midnight. Hour 23 is basically the last hour. Hour 24 is the last hour. So, and what we see here is that basically we see the highest emission in rush hour, morning rush hour, afternoon rush hour. This is anticipated, and also compared to 2011, 2017 emissions is slightly lower. So this is for Orange County. You can see the emissions started popping up when it comes to rush hours. And this is for Osceola. Same conclusion here. I'm going to quickly jump to the next one, and this is for Lake County. Also same conclusion. Basically, rush hour, more emissions as anticipated. So for next step, we're already done with vehicular sources. We're already done with weather modeling. And next, we're already done with, we just done with estimate emission from vegetation from trees. So we're preparing the reports for, and for next step, once we're done with that, we're gonna use this thing called smoke model, basically to estimate all the emission sources. And once that was done, we're gonna explore different policy options. You know, one of the reasons we categorize all the emissions, for example, in these different categories is because there are different options available for each category. For example, running exhaust, you can implement inspection maintenance program. For evap system, you can implement something called vapor recovery laws. So basically, there are different policy options targeting different options. With that, so I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have the most questions always. Just when we talk about the policy
Yeah.
stuff that you're going to get to, is that kind of policies that this committee and board will be recommending as like legislative priorities? Or are these kind of policy things that will result in projects being ranked differently because they reduce, you know, congestion and sitting, you know, at a stop on a highway? Like how?
Policy related, everything that you just said.
Okay.
So in the sense of a contingency, it's what we'll need to do as an organization, how we'll need to spend.
Right.
Other things outside of Metro Plan Orlando's wheelhouse, a lot of local government, municipal programs, and potentially, you know, statutory changes that may be necessary for us to do business differently.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, give you a run for your money with the amount of questions, Aaron. So it's two parts. So do either of your models incorporate the market share of electric vehicles into the modeling, or is it based on air quality sensors?
That's an excellent question, sorry. So the motor vehicle simulator moves model does include the vehicle fleet composition in there. So I did look into the breakdown of the composition and compare the composition. So there is a small portion of electric vehicles, but rather it's predicted to be quite small. So if we were to design for the future, we might have to, based on, I'm hearing that everyone loves Tesla, so we might adjust for the vehicle fleet composition for all the future years. But this modeling is done for 2011, 2017, so that was already done. So that composition is there.
Great. And so that's related to my second part. In terms of policy, I would recommend taking a look at the City of Orlando's EV readiness roadmap. It breaks into 3 goals, and one of those goals is multimodal as well, so that we're taking into account not just reducing emissions through electric vehicles, but providing a freedom of choice of getting around in another way that could have benefits to reducing congestion if people are able to move around outside of a single occupant vehicle. So
Yeah,
that's
thanks.
just a plug for City of Orlando there.
Thanks. So as Alex, right? Sorry, as Alex just mentioned, so when it comes to policy options, we're going to have to discuss with Metro Plan extensively about what policy option we're going to look at. So, but that's definitely be very interesting. Thanks.
Laura, would you distribute that to the committee members after the meeting?
Yes.
Is that something she can do without violating anything, I think, right? Great.
I can send it to the chair to distribute with.
You can send it to Keith, that would
Keith?
be most sunshine friendly.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So this, you're getting ready to run the study for 2023?
We haven't talked about it yet, but yeah. So the only
And I'm just wondering, when do you plan on doing another study to see if, you know, some of the changes, such as more electric vehicles, I don't think we've done that well
Yeah.
with multimodal transportation, but has it had an impact? I mean,
Yeah, I'll just speak to it. A lot of it's data availability based
Yes.
on our horizon year of 2017. It's typical for any type of, modeling effort that your base year is unfortunately 2 years past where you're at. These are pre-pandemic growth, travel pattern conditions, so that's something notable, but scope, where we're at, the work that we've already done, started almost a year ago in some cases, that's going to be our base year for modeling purposes.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Rob?
Not my area of expertise. I'm not a statistician either. But I would say as we're developing policy for this, we need to be very careful when we're talking about, like, the solution is not, like, when you're presenting data that it's tons per mile, but you also have to consider how many vehicles you're moving per mile in that segment. So it's sort of
Yeah.
like when you look at greenhouse emissions maps, the suburban areas look like they're greener, but when you do it per capita, it's the urban cores that are greener.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful when we're setting policy. The solution to this isn't to widen roads to reduce vehicular congestion. Maybe it's to promote other modes to reduce the congestion. But we just have to be careful when we're setting policy and making sure we're getting the whole picture.
All right, thanks. I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. No more? Ms. Harburg, are you done? Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, our final presentation is Pedsafe 2 by Mr. Nick Spatola.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. We're here to talk about the Pedsafe 2 project. This project falls under the umbrella of FDOT's Pedsafe program, which in larger part is part of the ATCMTD grant that the department has been working on over the last several years. Like I mentioned, this is the phase 2. Phase 1 initially took place and is wrapping up construction now. It was focused on the UCF campus area and really an evaluation of technologies and what they could bring to the future. So for this presentation, what we thought we would do is we would look at how you cross an intersection. So I want to cross the intersection, great, everybody knows how to do it right, easy, not a big deal. Push the button, you wait some more, you start to doubt, did I push the right button? Does that button actually do anything? It's okay, I'll push the other button. Maybe that's the one I need to push. I'll wait some more, and then I'll wait even longer. Yeah, and that's everybody's favorite. Just keep pushing it, because the more you push it, the higher the priority gets, and the more likely you are to get a call. But what if we could change that? What if we could automatically place that call for you so you didn't have to hit the button? What if there was a light that let you know where you were crossing? What if there was a signal that let you know how long you're going to have to wait approximately? What if we can make that wait a little shorter? Would you be more likely to wait and follow the crossing the way it was intended to be used? And so that's what we're looking at. And we present this example as kind of what our goal is for Pedsafe 2. So you walk up, you hit the button, a wait indicator comes on. It says watch. Along with that, a blue light is emitted on either side of the intersection for where you want to cross on the pedestrian signal. So now you know where you want to go to and where you're at. So you know which crossing you're going with. You wait, you see the signal goes yellow, and a countdown timer begins. So you know now, I'm getting close to being able to cross. It goes red, timer goes down a little bit more. Finally, you get the walk indication and you walk with the signal. So this project, the Pedsafe 2 project, is part of a larger effort by the department focused on the US 441 or Orange Blossom Trail segment between Holden and I-4. And it's really looking at improving pedestrian and bicycle safety in that corridor, and doing that through a couple different means, looking at vehicle speed reductions, looking at increasing crossing opportunities, and promoting overall safety within the corridor, realigning bus stops, redesigning curb returns to reduce radii, and improve safety by lowering speeds. Here you can see a kind of a list of countermeasures that project is going to be implementing. They're putting in some new mid-block crossings, some additional pedestrian hybrid beacons, doing some landscaping improvements, some median fencing to really concentrate pedestrians to those specified crossing locations. And so all of that's being done. So what we're doing is coming in behind that project to implement the technology side of things. And what that allows us to do is to look at technology as it evolves. As everyone is, I'm sure, aware, technology changes extremely quickly. And so this gives us the flexibility to continue to look at technology while that project's under construction. It allows us to get the latest and greatest, and it allows us to test things up front so we have a good understanding of how they're going to work when they're installed. It also allows us to select a specialized contractor that deals with these types of deployments. As far as schedules are concerned, that pedestrian improvement project that we talked about, the Orange Blossom Trail improvements, they're going to go to construction here in the next month or two. It'll take about a year to complete construction. Our project, the Pedsafe 2 project, will follow behind. We're currently moving into the design phase. The project will be let in June 23, and it will also take about a year to construct. One of the other major changes with this project is how we're interacting with the community. We're really looking to engage the community in performing some unique outreach. We want to meet with the community in an environment where they feel comfortable. We don't want to make them come to us. We want to go to them. We want to answer their questions. We want to discuss the work that's ongoing in the corridor. We want to dispel any myths. As everybody is, I'm sure, aware, you know, you put a camera out and people start to get concerned about privacy, but we want to be able to show people, hey, yep, there's that camera, you'll see it, but here's the video feed from that camera, and this is what that camera is actually doing. And being able to show them in person, camera, video, and what the outcome is. And that involves some live demos, which is something we're working on setting up right now, going out, meeting with the public, showing them different parts and pieces of a signalized intersection so they understand how these things work and kind of dispel a lot of the myths that may be out there. We're also looking at some other areas. Like I mentioned, this project is going to start with that section of Orange Blossom Trail, but we're also looking to the north and south along Orange Blossom Trail and also along State Road 50, which was part of the original Pedsafe 1 project. One of the other things we're looking to do is some pop-up events where we go to community centers and possibly schools to meet with, you know, kids. Kids take things home, right? They tell their parents what they saw, what's going on. So that's a great way for us to inform, you know, the broader community, but also to engage and inspire a future generation. We talk about incorporating future technology, and this is where safety comes into play. You know, all of this technology does one thing. It helps improve safety, and that is done in two different ways. One from a pedestrian side, which we already talked about, but also some future applications where we look at instrumented vehicles and being able to send them warnings that there's a collision imminent, to take some evasive action to try and avoid that collision. Again, in the future, we can do that with pedestrians and smartphone applications. But one of the important things I want to note is we're looking to bridge that gap. And so some of the things we're doing are going to address unequipped motorists, like we talked about with the weight indicators and the lighting. That's going to address unequipped motorists. But we want to look to the future to make sure that 5, 10, 15 years from now, when there is a market saturation of connected and autonomous vehicles, that infrastructure is already in place to be able to improve the vehicle safety as well as the pedestrian safety. The other thing it's going to allow us to do is collect a lot of statistics. This is going to let us look at compliance rates. Are people actually using the pedestrian features the way they're supposed to? It's going to allow us to identify near misses, and that will allow us in turn to take proactive measures to improve safety. So maybe we have high-speed cornering that we noticed. Vehicles are taking, turn at a very high speed. Well, that can create the potential pedestrian conflicts if someone steps out into the roadway, a high-speed vehicle is approaching. We can identify those near misses and take a proactive approach to solving that as opposed to a reactive. And all of that data is going to allow us to make adjustments to operations in a more real-time manner. With that, take any questions, and thank you.
I've got a question for you. I'm so excited about these options. Not being an engineer, I had no idea that there were improvements to these crossings that everybody stands there and feels the same way. So nationally, is this a new thing, or has everybody else done this elsewhere thus far? Is this like an industry standard type of shift? Because I'm wondering why all of our intersections don't kind of head this way, or at least some real critical ones.
So I say it's a mixture. These technologies are currently being used in different capacities. Some of this was based on something we saw out in Portland that was done specifically for bicyclists, that have to wait in a marked area. And so it helps them to know, hey, I'm stopped in the right area and I've been detected as a bicyclist, which we know is always an issue detecting bicyclists. So it allows them that information. Also, wait time is something they're providing. So we're taking that concept, which was also deployed in Europe, from bicyclists to the pedestrian side. And so, yes, we will have to request experimentation from the MUTCD to allow us to test these things, but we don't think it's a far reach considering some of these applications are already being done with bicyclists. We're just repurposing them for pedestrians.
And that information, like the data, is that something that like autonomously it knows when those near misses are, or is the person like sitting there watching the video trying to identify those things?
So that's a great question. So yes, it is autonomous. It's an AI platform that identifies the conflicts in near misses. And one of the things that's important, it's not always near misses. Sometimes it's just aggressive driving. It could be red light running. So it identifies those things automatically, but it can be used to notify operators in real time. So if there's something going on, maybe there's something in the roadway and people are swerving, the operator could get a notification that there's an event happening or there's multiple of these events happening, and then they could take action. So again, no one's sitting there watching and trying to pick those out, but it can be used to identify problems that maybe can be solved immediately.
Okay, and I hate to ask you so many questions, but we have a real innovative project. I think Keith mentioned it earlier in the tip about the Z crossings on 192 come into our downtown area in St. Cloud, which it's been done, but it's not been done in Osceola County much. So we're concerned about people using them as designed. Like on paper, they reduce conflict points, but if you don't use them right, then, and you still go straight and you go your old way you always have, it may be an issue. So we've asked for some continued monitoring. So my question really is there stuff in the corridor that has to exist already to allow for this engineering solution to be implemented? Like, do you have to have fiber in the ground? Like how, what in an existing intersection has to be there to allow for this solution to be implemented?
So that's two parts. So yes, there's the unequipped side of things, like we talked about with the blue lights and the weight indications. All that stuff could be done at any intersection because that's kind of, I would say, traditional signal wiring, hardware, things that everybody's familiar with. The blue lights are used for red light turning cameras a lot locally. Some pedestrian push buttons already have the real small little red light. So that stuff could be implemented really at any intersection. When we start talking about the collision avoidance and the artificial intelligence, that's where you start to need communications. And as we all know, that could take many different forms. That could be a hardwire fiber communication. It could be a cellular communication. So there are different tiers, and based on, and really that's one of the goals of this project is to kind of develop this suite of tools so that maybe we don't have any communications. We don't want to put in cellular, we don't want to put in fiber, but we could do these other things. But maybe at the next intersection we have communications and we can do this other set of things. So yes, it's a mixture. Some of the things we hope can be implemented without really much effort, and some of them will require communications, especially the artificial intelligence, because that video has to be analyzed, although some of the analysis can be done local at the intersection without having communications back.
Right.
It doesn't really benefit, a bigger benefit. Now, there are other benefits, like we talk about passive pedestrian detection, or maybe adjusting walking times based on actual speeds as opposed to a preset calculation. All of those things really don't need the communication. They can be done at the intersection level, but you're still not getting that full benefit. So
I just want to say thank you to you for doing this work and for the, Orange County and City of Orlando for implementing these innovative things. I know they've deployed pretty much every other solution on those corridors, and
and-
it's really important.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right?
Thank
All of those, the speed management reduces severity of crashes, improves safety, gets people to cross at centralized locations. And those are all gonna help. There's no question about that. But you still can't make people push the button, and you can't make people cross with the signal. And so our goal is not to make them, but to make it, to encourage them, to give them information so that they understand the situation, that they've been heard, that they can cross there, and if maybe they wait 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds, they'll get the crossing as opposed to having to run through traffic, and that improves safety immensely.
So maybe I'm incorrect here, but I think most people who walk up
To, sorry. I think most people who walk up to a the button and they push it, they think it's gonna happen immediately.
Correct.
They do not understand that they have to go through the cycle, that it doesn't change the cycle. I don't know how you get that out to people, but most of them do think, and that's why they keep punching it, I think, is because they know if they keep punching it, it's gonna change immediately.
And that's what we believe that as well. So it's really even just the basic thing of, right, like I said, there's some pedestrian buttons that have that tiny little dot button,
Yeah.
that lights up when you hit it, so you know at least it worked. But, if you're pushing the button, you rarely ever look at the button as you push it. No, you hit the button and you're looking where you want to go. So we're trying to give a bigger visual cue to people, easier to spot, so that they at least know, like, they've been heard and they've been detected. But yeah, there is some additional, outreach needed to let people know how the process goes. And one of the things that Orange Blossom Trail project is doing is a pretty broad community outreach to inform for pedestrians and bicyclists how those signals work and how to use them properly, so that they get the benefit. Because it also changes by time of day. You may have to wait 60 seconds in the morning, but in the middle of the day, you may only have to wait 30. So it's also variable. So people, they don't get that consistency that they like. Like I like every time I walk up, I want to hit it, and I know I'm going to wait 30 seconds, and then I'm good. But it doesn't work that way. And so that's where informing them kind of helps overcome that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay,
I have a question.
all right.
Have you looked at other locations rather than signalized intersections like roundabouts or mid-block crossings as potential for this kind of feedback between the pedestrian and the crossing situation?
Yeah, so we will have, within the primary project corridor, there are 6 mid-block crossings that will be included. They're pedestrian hybrid beacons, and so those will be included. I know the city of Orlando has done some work with RFBs and doing some passive pedestrian detection as well. So yes, these things can be applied outside of signalized intersections. Again, when you get to roundabouts, that's when it becomes a little more of a challenge because you don't typically have your normal signal infrastructure in place. Now, a lot of roundabouts have, I would say, ITS infrastructure where they at least have cameras to monitor operations just so that they can have a visual on them. So that gives you a time point, but there's not as much infrastructure in place with roundabouts, so it makes some of these things more challenging. But I am aware of the collision avoidance system they're using down in Sarasota County at a couple roundabouts to monitor operations down there. So it has been done, and it can be done.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, that concludes our today's presentations. It's now public comments. We're actually asking for public comments on action items. We'll hear public comments on the action items. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. If any member of the public wishes to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function, and we will recognize you and or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
There are no hands on the virtual side, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Do we have any members of the public attending in person who wish to make comments?
We have not received any.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right. Are there any written comments that were submitted before the meeting?
No.
No. So we have only one action item today. Members making or seconding a motion, please state your name. We are asking for approval of the April 22nd TAC meeting minutes.
This is Shad Smith. I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second, Brett Blackadder.
Thank you. So we have a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or corrections? No? Okay. This is a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. So we have no TAC-only presentations. In your tab 2, we have some general information in your agenda packets. Upcoming meetings of interest. Our next TAC meeting will be held on June 24th. The next Metro Plan Orlando board meeting will be held on June 8th. The TIP public meeting will be held on June 20th, and it's a virtual meeting. Does anyone have any other business? None? Do we? You do? Okay.
Well, for
Or-
comments.
Uh-huh.
Is that now?
We can move, public comments, yes. Do any members want to make any final comments? Yes.
So I have a couple things I'd like to share. One is that the USDOT has released a Safe Streets and Roads for All grants. There's over $1 billion this round, and if your municipality doesn't have an existing comprehensive safety action plan, this grant will fund the creation of that. So if anyone has been thinking about doing a Vision Zero action plan, this is a great grant opportunity for that. And then also USDOT is accepting applications for they're reestablishing the Transportation Equity Committee, which I think is a really great opportunity for folks from our area to be on that committee if you have experience in transit, transportation, housing, civil rights, all that great stuff. It would be really awesome to see someone from our area on that committee. And then one request and discussion item is I'd be interested in getting a legislative update from Metro Plan and staff on a couple items from what happened this year in terms of either the sales tax and what that would mean for our committee if that goes through, as well as the state legislation on our nearby special district in Reedy Creek and any implications that would have for our committee.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay, we'll make a note. Okay, so I have, anyone else have any comments? Okay,
So I just wanted to make a general announcement. This will be my last TAC meeting as a representative of Osceola County. I've been able to take an opportunity to become the zoning manager at the city of St. Cloud. So I look forward to working with many of you still, just wearing a different hat. I appreciate all the camaraderie that I've had in the
Okay.
past few years.
well, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I have one comment. I'm not really sure what to do with your desire to have a workshop. How do we do a workshop, and would you want to have this workshop before we actually vote on the priority projects list?
That would be the desire, yes.
That would be your desire. Because it does say in here, and this is right, this is off of Metro Plan Orlando's website. The priority project list is updated annually, allowing local governments to plan for the implementation of projects in their communities. The project begins with a call for projects by Metro Plan Orlando staff in March of each year, and they're submitted by the local governments. Staff works with members of these committees to develop a draft list that builds on the list from the previous year. I don't know that that happens anymore.
Yeah, the past two MTPs have that webpage.
The webpage then needs to be updated.
That's why I say if you read this document, just like the tip that has the detail, Duly noted.
Okay.
But the reason we don't do call for projects anymore is the MTP, identification of those needs during the long-range planning process is our call needs development, and then we implement that. And again, we're updating the modal master plan, so there's gonna be calls for projects, again, new calls, renewed
Okay.
calls,
Okay.
for the next 12 to 18 months. So
Okay.
keep that in mind, but we will update the website, it's kind of the plaque on the Statue of Liberty, you know, so integrate the calls. But anyways, we'll update our website.
Okay, so how many people would be interested in attending a workshop on this, you know, how this works? Okay, so how do we pick a date? Keith?
We'll probably have to do a poll of the committee members.
Okay, can
to
you,
see who's available.
Do you do a, like the monkey polls or whatever?
I think, yeah, we do Lisa will send out a poll to
Poll, okay,
members of the TAC and TISMO.
okay. Great, all right, thank you. All right, so I think, okay, public comments, if any member of the public wishes to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function, and you'll be recognized or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We will send you a prompt to unmute your mic. After you're recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make comments?
There are no hands raised on the virtual side, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do we have any members attending in person who would wish to make comments?
We have not received any.
Okay, any written comments on
No.
any other issues that they may have? Okay, so at this time, we are adjourned. Thank you.